The Cincinnati Reds have been hailed as viable candidates to trade for White Sox ace Garrett Crochet, just like I'm a viable candidate to cut out carbs. I'm not really into either one of these.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Reds. My name is Jeff Carr. I am a lifelong Cincinnati Reds fan, and I've been hosting this podcast as a solo host or a co-host with Steve Offenbaker for the better part of 7 years now. I'm glad that you're alongside me here today because Locked On Reds is for the Reds fan that knows what happened. They want to know why, and we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every single day, and on today's show, we're going to be talking all about a rumor about the Reds possibly acquiring another ace, Garrett Crochet. Later on in the show, we want to figure out exactly how this could happen and the one way that it could. I'm going to tell you what that is later on in the show. The biggest question, though, is what the White Sox are going to be looking for in a deal for Garrett Crochet. We'll get an inside look at that from our Locked On White Sox host, Todd Welter, in just a few minutes. But I want to start with my reservations about this trade rumor. That's all on today's Locked On Reds that is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And where we'll get started here today, Garrett Crochet. I'm not sold on this trade rumor for the Reds. The Reds possibly acquiring last year's ace of the White Sox, Garrett Crochet. Let's break down why this is even out there in the first place. This morning, really, John Morosi from MLB Network tweeted that the Reds and the Cubs, he listed the Reds and the Cubs together in this one, are viable candidates, quote unquote, to trade for Garrett Crochet. That's not an announcement that the Reds are actually negotiating a deal here. That is A plus B equals C. That is conjecture. There's not a Chris Getz called Nick Krall, Chris Getz being the White Sox general manager, and they want to make a deal. The Reds have prospects to deal. Yes, that's the case. In fact, MLB Pipeline listed them as the second best team, second most likely team to make a trade involving prospects during these winter meetings. But again, this is all just putting things together. Yes, they've got Sal Stewart, they got Cam Collier, they got Alfredo Duno, they got Edwin Arroyo, they got a bunch of pitching prospects. They could totally trade all those guys for major league players. They're not about to. But okay, would this trade make any sense? That's what we're here to talk about because I don't love it. I'm not sold on the idea of trading for Garrett Crochet. And the biggest reason why is because there's not really a whole lot of information on Crochet. Yeah, he was pretty good in 2024. He had 32 starts, which means he didn't miss a start. He had a strikeouts per 9 that was elite. He struck out 12 batters per 9 innings. And he had a walks per 9 that was also elite. 2 walks per 9, 2.0 walks per 9. It was amazing to see those kind of numbers. But here's the thing that I have the biggest reservation on. He had 32 starts. He pitched 146 innings. That meant that he literally averaged like 4 2/3 innings per start. He averaged less than 5 innings per start in 2024. And this is a guy who wasn't a starter before last year. In 2023, he dealt with Tommy John surgery. He got Tommy John in 2022, and he was recovering from it. And then in 2023, he came back, and then he had a shoulder injury that kept him out. He didn't pitch very much in 2023, didn't pitch at all in 2022, and he was a relief pitcher in 2021 and 2020 before he became a starter in 2024. Garrett Crochet had 73 career innings. The track record isn't there. And when you add in the fact that if the Reds were to trade for Garrett Crochet, they would have to give up a lot to do it. A lot for a guy with a little track record. I don't love that combination. Plus, this isn't the Reds' biggest need to fill. The Reds have really addressed the rotation. Nick Martinez is back. Brady Singer is here. Jonathan India is in Kansas City. They've done a lot to address the rotation already. And while Garrett Crochet has 2 years of control, 2 years of team control, and that would make the rotation just enormously good, this would deplete the Reds' ability to do anything else on the trade market. So then they would be forced to jump into the free agent pool, which they seem reticent to do. I don't think that is their first aim here, as much as we have said they should go talk to Teoscar Hernandez. They should definitely go talk to Anthony Santander. They should call Tyler O'Neill. They should call Jerkson Profar. It feels like they hate the idea of a bidding war, so they want to go make a trade. Well, if you make a trade for Garrett Crochet, you're probably going to cut out your prospect capital, your ability to make any more deals. We're going to talk here in a little bit with Todd Welter from Locked On White Sox exactly what the White Sox are looking for. And he has some nice things to say as far as they're not looking for players that are almost major league ready. They're looking for as much talent as they could possibly get, whether they're far from the major leagues or not. And they're looking for position talent, so they're probably not going to be asking for Chase Petty or Chase Burns. Probably not going to be looking at guys like that. So that makes me feel a little bit better about it. But again, we're acquiring a guy that doesn't have a lot of track record here. It just feels like he is a glass cannon that's going to cost as much as a bona fide ace. And I wonder how close the trade would have to be to what the Mariners gave up for Luis Castillo. You remember how much we liked that trade, and we still like that trade of what the Reds got back for Luis Castillo. Is that what we're talking about with Garrett Crochet? Because I don't want the Reds to give up that kind of a trade package to acquire Garrett Crochet, because Luis Castillo had been doing it for a couple of years. He had been showing that he was an ace for a couple of years. Garrett Crochet's only shown it for one season. What does that mean for this year? Is he going to stay healthy this year? The 32 starts makes me feel better about that possibility, but he only did that once. Where we were excited about Brady Singer's longevity and stability because he had done it multiple years. He had done 32 starts in 2024, 29 starts in 2023, more starts than any pitcher on the current roster has made in any one season. Garrett Crochet's only done that once. So I just look at this and I say, there's a lot of talent and stuff. Stuff is what people want when it comes to pitchers in this day and age. This era of pitching is about the stuff. And Garrett Crochet's got the stuff. But the track record is what bothers me. And that is why when I hear this rumor that the Reds are viable candidates, viable, I say, okay, yeah, sure. You could put a trade together to get Garrett Crochet. But should you? Not really that sold on that. Part of the reason that I'm not sold on that is because of what I mentioned. I think the cost is going to be quite a lot. The trade capital is just going to be substantial. Todd Welter from Locked On White Sox will join us next to tell us just how much the Reds will need to trade away. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need in one place when it comes to live bets in the NFL, because they've got stats, they've got scores, they've got all the biggest highlights and play-by-play and so much more, all on the same place that you make your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And while you're there, you can take a look at next year's odds to win the National League. FanDuel has the Reds at 33-1 odds to get that NL pennant. Those odds are actually the same as the St. Louis Cardinals and better than the San Francisco Giants. Very interesting. Obviously, they're still long, but there's always a shot. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We are talking Reds today, here all day, every week, every month, all year long. Make sure that you subscribe to get at least 30 minutes of Reds talk in your feed every single day.
Yeah, so the GM, Chris Getz, basically said that they want positional prospects. They need positional prospects. If you look at their farm system, it's stacked with arms. You look at their top 10, stacked with arms. They just lack impact bats. Colson Montgomery, their top hitting prospect, hit under 220 at AAA, although he did do well in September and in the Arizona Fall League. But they just lack a lot of impact bats because that's just something that their system has never been good at developing, and they just never been good at drafting it. The other thing is they're willing to take on prospects that maybe that's been reported that are not close to the big leagues. Last year, one of the reasons why the Dylan Cease move probably didn't happen was they wanted players that were close to the big leagues. That's one of the reasons why they ended up with Drew Thorpe and Jairo Iriarte from the Padres, because they were pitchers that you could live without, and they were close to the big leagues. So that's kind of what the White Sox are looking for. And yes, they are reportedly asking for a big offer in terms of top tier prospects. And then that circles back to, have Reds fans grasped, if you want something good, you're going to have to give up something good to get it back? Because I still have the scars from when I suggested a certain amount of talent in Southside Showdown for the Reds trading for Dylan Cease.
I think it's funny that, like, this is the key time of year, right, where everybody's coming up with their own trade proposals, and most of the time it's the broken seat in right field for Aaron Judge, things like that. I do think that a lot of Reds fans have gone through the last few years understanding prospect worth and understanding what it means for the Reds to build from within. So I think that there's a general hesitancy in Reds country when it comes to prospect deals. They believe that they could trade the failed prospects for top flight talent. And that is where I really have reservations with this, because that's not what's happening here. You're looking at Edwin Arroyo. You're looking at a guy who, if he really comes back, shows he's healthy, and shows he can hit the ball really well in spring training, you could be talking about a late stage call up here in 2025. And maybe if in a hypothetical world he gets traded to the White Sox, maybe the White Sox even fast track him a little bit. He's getting toward the age of being a major leaguer. It's just he lost a year last year for injuries. He lost a year in 2020 for COVID. So that's why his where he's at in the minor leagues isn't necessarily where you would expect him to be. He'll be in AAA at some point this year for sure, if not at the beginning of the year. And a guy like Sal Stewart, who is hitting the cover off the ball defensively, a few questions whether it's third base or first base, but he hit the cover off the ball in high A, looked like he's going to be pretty well here in double A this year. Same for Cam Collier. Cam Collier turned 19 last year, and he was in Dayton in high A. So, I mean, you're talking about a guy that's definitely got the world in front of him. Despite having been in the minors for a few years for the Reds, you still have a couple of years before he's major league ready. So I'd be interested maybe even in talking a little bit about those guys, because I think that if they were part of the deal, and this is where Reds fans have a problem, if you start naming Stewart, if you start naming Arroyo, they're like, oh, I don't know if we want to do that deal, but those are going to have to be the guys that you offer.
Yeah. On the flip side, obviously, you're not going to be the Sox don't need the pitching, so you don't have to worry about possibly giving up your two top prospects. Before I jump into Luis Robert Jr., the Reds were the last team to really get the number one prospect from a team that was also a top 15 prospect. How is Novale Marte paying off? I hopefully pronounce that name right. How is he paying off for the Reds? And again, why do you think we'll never see a deal like that ever again? Because you do have a lot of White Sox fans that are like, well, if we're trading Crochet, we better get the number one prospect. We better get, Roman Anthony from the Red Sox. And it's like, those deals aren't happening anymore. And your team was the last one because he was in single A.
I think it's simply because Luis Castillo was everything that you could expect from a Cy Young contender. And you could expect it for years and years and years, because while he was at the top of his game, he wasn't already like 30 or something like that. And he had been pitching super well for multiple seasons. The argument that I'm pushing back on with Garrett Crochet, like, I saw the talent last year. Before 2024, he had only thrown like 60 something innings, 70 something innings, something like
73.
that. And
73
yeah,
career innings.
in a relief capacity, dealing with Tommy John, which, to the credit of Tommy John surgery folks, when you get Tommy John, it takes a few years before you have to worry about that again. But the shoulder issue in 2023 also gave me a little bit of pause. So I look at Garrett Crochet and I'm like, man, I know the talent is there. I just need a little bit more of a track record. There was a great track record with Luis Castillo. On the Marte side of things, he showed flashes in 2023, barely played. I mean, we got like 30 games out of him, so we didn't know who we had, but we were excited. Then the PED suspension in 2024 cut off half his season, and when he came back, it looked like he really couldn't grasp what he had at the end of 2023. He completely had started over, and he never really got going in 2024. And so there's now a lot of folks that are out on him. I'm somewhere in the middle. I still think he's got talent. I still think the scouting report is viable. It's the word of the day. So I think that I want to see more from him, though I wouldn't say that I'm handing him the keys to third base, as some folks may have been ready to do after the 2023 cup of coffee that he had.
So finally, would the Reds be one of the teams willing to give up something significant for Luis Robert Jr.? That's the asking price right now. The White Sox, at least, they're willing to not take on a boatload of prospects. They just want something significant to get his $15 million off the books.
That's where I say, all right, I'm reticent to trade a guy like Stewart, Collier, Arroyo, maybe even a really young prospect in Alfredo Duno, who looks like a really solid catching prospect for the future. I'm reticent to do that for Crochet. I think I'd rather do that for Luis Robert. And I've kind of gone back and forth on this, because at the beginning of the offseason, I wasn't interested, because it felt like there was so many options out on the free agent market that the Reds could definitely go get one of those guys and significantly upgrade their outfield. But with Luis Robert, you are adding a guy that is under team control with a couple of team options and things like that on his contract that I think are very palatable, I guess is the word, for the Reds. That, what the deal is. You don't have to negotiate it. You don't have to convince them. It's make the trade, put the prospects in the deal. I think if I had to pick in a vacuum, I would do the deal, the large amount of prospects for Luis Robert over Garrett Crochet.
Yeah, I mean, because the reports are, though, a lot of the 29 other teams are saying, look, he's still talented, but he's never available. He's always hurt. He's only played 145 games one time, and the other time he played 100 games was this year, and it was exactly 100 games, and he hit 224. So, the Sox, they are at least realistic. My fear, though, is here's the thing. If they hold on to him and he gets hurt, and any team that trades for him, it's $40 million owed if the gamble goes your way. If it doesn't go your way, you got to pay him $2 million to go away. Now, granted, you get to pay him $2 million. I mean, the Sox just paid $5 million for Yohan Moncada to go away, but still, you're looking at a make or break season for Luis Robert Jr. And that's my fear, is the White Sox are trading him because they're afraid that he's going to get hurt again. And they also are crying poverty, and they want to get his $15 million plus the next $40 million owed off their books. So I would be glad if the Reds offered something significant, but as you said, a lot of teams are saying no, and the White Sox are being dumb and saying, well, you just guys want something for nothing. And it's like, well, okay, in Garrett Crochet's case, you could argue that. In Luis Robert Jr.'s case right now, his value is pennies on the dollar.
Okay, so I don't love the idea of trading for Garrett Crochet, but maybe I could be persuaded to. And you know what? James Rapien believes he can sway me. He'll try to next. Make sure to take us with you when you can't watch us. We are literally on every single podcasting audio app out there. Locked On Reds, you can find us everywhere. All right, for this segment here, I've spent 20 minutes like not really feeling this rumor, not really feeling this report. I don't know. It's more of a John Morosi. I had some coffee this morning and I had this thought. But when it comes to Garrett Crochet coming to the Reds, I'm just not buying it. But I actually had a text conversation with the man who runs Locked On Bengals, SI Bengals, SI Reds, SI Bearcats. Sometimes you're on the radio, sometimes you're on TV, you're traveling all over the place. He is James Rapien. And some of you may even have remembered that he hosted the show before I did. So I wanted to bring him in because he is in the camp that he sees a way forward for the Reds to get Garrett Crochet and make it make sense.
Yeah, and Jeff, I appreciate you having me. It doesn't make sense with the rotation sort of set, right? You've invested in Nick Martinez. I'm sure you've went over that. You make the trade for Brady Singer. You have young, promising arms that who knows, maybe you're going to rely on early this year as part of that rotation. So it's like, well, how does he fit? And to me, the only reason why you would do this, one, he's obviously a heck of a pitcher, 25, seems like he's ascending.
Right.
So we understand all of that. But the reason would be, well, you're having talks about an outfielder, and maybe they're interested in Nick Lodolo. Maybe they're interested in someone like that. And instead of just swapping out a guy that, when healthy, has been your ace at times over the past 2 seasons, and it's been hard for him to stay healthy. And I'm just using Lodolo. I don't know if that's the exact ask.
Right.
But you go get Crochet and pair him with Brady Singer and pair him with Hunter Green. And you have Nick Martinez and you have Rhett Lauder just sitting there ready to blossom at any point. I do wonder if that's the path. And so I could see it, but it can't be the only move because
Right.
there's just, you can never have too much pitching, but it almost feels like you have too much pitching on paper.
Right. And that's kind of where my reservations began with this idea. Going and getting more pitching kind of feels like, all right, we've addressed this. We addressed it again, and now we're addressing it again, and we still haven't touched the outfield. And I think I can see this if it opens up a path. And quite frankly, I'm in the camp that if you could make a deal for Nick Lodolo, I think I'd do it. I don't love what I've seen from Nick Lodolo this past year. I'm a little bit worried about that. And maybe I'm overreacting, but it feels like in order for him to mitigate blisters, he has to grip his curveball differently, which completely changes the entire pitch. So if that is something, if it's like a hypothetical situation where the A's are saying you got Brent Rooker if you give us Nick Lodolo, or even if you've got like another team that's got like a log jam of pretty good outfielders, who knows, maybe you hook up with Baltimore. Baltimore's got so many young outfielders that are team controllable. And they're like, we want Nick Lodolo or we want Rhett Lauder. I think if we get a Garrett Crochet from the White Sox, then I could stomach the idea of that deal if they then turn around and do something else. I said that coming into the season, Nick Krall had to be busy. Didn't think he'd be this busy, though.
Yeah. Let me ask you, because if it comes to Lauder, and let's just have that conversation, because I think a lot of people are going to roll their eyes. Nick Lodolo, it's easy to move on from him if you're getting a power hitting infield or outfielder, and then you also trade a couple of prospects that haven't made it yet to get that to get someone like Crochet who's just going to be awesome. But Lauder or for Crochet, how many years does he have?
He's got 2.
I have not.
He has 2 years.
So
left.
I need a lot for Lauder, man, because I think he's going to be
Yes.
pretty darn good.
Yes.
I think he's going to be pretty darn good.
And that might be the thing, right? Lodolo would get you. I'm trying to think in tiers because we've been thinking in tiers free agent wise. You know, Juan Soto's in the God tier that the Reds aren't going to touch. Teoscar Hernandez and Anthony Santander.
I'm a God fan, by the way. I'm a God fan.
Yeah, God's pretty cool. In the demigod tier, we got Teoscar Hernandez and Anthony Santander. The Reds might get those guys, might not, might get outbid for them. In a trade package, I would definitely want somebody in no less than the Teoscar Hernandez, Anthony Santander tier for for Rhett Lauder. And I don't know that I'm adding too much else to that deal because Rhett Lauder is so good. I don't know that Nick Lodolo gets that done though. Like I think that that's probably the issue, and I even presented the issue with with Nick Lodolo. I'm saying too many names.
I know. It got me too.
That that when you talk about Nick Lodolo, like he could be very attractive to some teams, and then they could ask that question, well, how's the curveball looking? And
Sure.
then do the Reds have an answer? So that's probably where Rhett Lauder would just come into the conversation of, okay, well, what about him?
How about White Sox? Here's another scenario, and I love these.
Mhm.
How about you go Lodolo plus a prospect for Crochet?
I would almost say, and based on the
Because
reports
now
from
you're upgrading.
right,
You still can do whatever you want elsewhere, and you don't have all of those questions with Crochet that you have with Lodolo. I'm in. Just so you know,
and
it depends on the prospect, of course.
and
Picking
you're
up Chief
getting
Burns, but
better talent for 2 years. The only thing, and I keep coming back to this, and I said this earlier on in the show, the only thing that I have about Crochet is that he did it last year, but
Yep.
last year's the only year he did it.
Yep.
The years
doubt.
before that, he dealt with Tommy John, he dealt with shoulder injuries. Years before that, he was a relief pitcher. So I think, and excuse me, Todd from Locked On White Sox was just asking me about the Luis Castillo trade, and is that something that the Reds would offer for Garrett Crochet? And I pushed back on that, and I said Luis Castillo had been doing it for a couple of years at that point. Garrett Crochet's only done it for 1 year. But I do feel like he's removed from those injuries, that if it were Lodolo and let's say a mid-level prospect, no, it wouldn't be. It would still have to be top 10. Lodolo and South Stewart. I think I would do that.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Be,
because you're upgrading, but you're not giving up one of your top 3, 5, and so, yeah, I think we're similar here and on the same page. It's one, if you're
you've
giving
swayed
up,
me. You have, yeah.
It's one or the other, right? Like if you're trading for a guy like Crochet, well, then you better be moving a guy like Lodolo. I don't think either of us are excited about moving Louder, especially with what we saw from him and how he's just quickly went boom, 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 boom. Like he might be able to be that dude.
Which
for a long
Chase
time
Burns is supposed to do the same thing, so hopefully that's the case.
Hopefully, right? And so then when Crochet is no longer on the Reds, if you traded for him, then you have these other guys that are there, and
you
so
didn't break the bank to get him too. That's the thing.
It's the delicate balance, and so maybe they have to get creative with how they upgrade their team. And if you have to give up Lodolo and a prospect to insert whatever hitter, I would give up a couple prospects, quality prospects, of course, for Crochet. So I see the path, and the path has got to be the best version of the 2025 Reds that you can find and that you can make. And so that's up to Nick Kroll to make it work.
This feels like a viable idea. By the way, word of the day, if anybody hasn't caught on to that. Anyway.
Let's do it.
That'll wrap up this edition of the Locked On Reds podcast. Thank you so much for checking out today's show. Make sure you subscribe. We've got a live show coming for you tomorrow, Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. Make sure you join us then on our Locked On Reds YouTube page. We'll be taking questions and comments from the comments section. We love it if you join us and be active in that discussion as well. That's at 2 p.m. on Thursday afternoon, 2 p.m. Eastern time. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB. Baseball guru, easy for me to say, Sully, he's got you covered every single day. He knows all things present and past when it comes to baseball, and he's going to inject some humor in there as well. Check out Locked On MLB wherever you get your podcast, just like Locked On Reds. Because, we're going to be Locked On Reds every single day. Viable.